Chapter 54. As we walked along, I reflected on a circumstance which all that I had lately heard about Strickland forced on my attention. Here, on this remote island, he seemed to have aroused none of the detestation with which he was regarded at home, but compassion rather, and his vagaries were accepted with tolerance. To these people, native and European, he was a queer fish, but they were used to queer fish, and they took him for granted. The world was full of odd persons who did odd things, and perhaps they knew that a man is not what he wants to be, but what he must be. In England and France he was the square peg in the round hole, but here the holes were any sort of shape, and no sort of peg was quite amiss. I do not think he was any gentler here, less selfish or less brutal, but the circumstances were more favorable. If he had spent his life amid these surroundings, he might have passed for no worse a man than another. He received here what he neither expected nor wanted among his own people, sympathy. I tried to tell Captain Bruno something of the astonishment with which this filled me, and for a little while he did not answer. "It is not strange that I, at all events, should have had sympathy for him," he said at last, "for, though perhaps neither of us knew it, we were both aiming at the same thing. What on earth can it be that two people so dissimilar as you and Strickland could aim at?" I asked, smiling. "Beauty." "A large order," I murmured. "Do you know how men can be so obsessed by love that they are deaf and blind to everything else in the world? They are as little their own masters as the slaves chained to the benches of a galley." The passion that held Strickland in bondage was no less tyrannical than love. "How strange that you should say that," I answered. For long ago I had the idea that he was possessed of a devil, and the passion that held Strickland was a passion to create beauty. It gave him no peace. It urged him hither and thither. He was eternally a pilgrim, haunted by a divine nostalgia, and the demon within him was ruthless. There are men whose desire for truth is so great that to attain it they will shatter the very foundation of their world. Of such was Strickland. Only beauty with him took the place of truth. I could only feel for him a profound compassion. That is strange also. A man whom he had deeply wronged told me that he felt a great pity for him. I was silent for a moment. "I wonder if there you have found the explanation of a character which has always seemed to me inexplicable. How did you hit on it?" He turned to me with a smile. "Did I not tell you that I, too, in my way was an artist? I realized in myself the same desire as animated him. But whereas his medium was paint, mine has been life." Then Captain Bruno told me a story which I must repeat, since, if only by way of contrast, it adds something to my impression of Strickland. It has also to my mind a beauty of its own. Captain Bruno was a Breton, and had been in the French Navy. He left it on his marriage, and settled down on a small property he had near Quimper to live for the rest of his days in peace. But the failure of an attorney left him suddenly penniless, and neither he nor his wife was willing to live in penury where they had enjoyed consideration. During his seafaring days he had cruised the South Seas, and he determined now to seek his fortune there. He spent some months in Papeete to make his plans and gain experience. Then, on money borrowed from a friend in France, he bought an island in the Paumotus. It was a ring of land round a deep lagoon, uninhabited, and covered only with scrub and wild guava. With the intrepid woman who was his wife and a few natives, he landed there and set about building a house and clearing the scrub so that he could plant coconuts. That was 20 years before, and now what had been a barren island was a garden. It was hard and anxious work at first, and we worked strenuously, both of us. Every day I was up at dawn, clearing, planting, working on my house, and at night when I threw myself on my bed it was to sleep like a log till morning. My wife worked as hard as I did. Then children were born to us, first a son, and then a daughter. My wife and I have taught them all they know. We had a piano sent out from France, and she has taught them to play and to speak English, and I have taught them Latin and mathematics, and we read history together. They can sail a boat. They can swim as well as the natives. There is nothing about the land of which they are ignorant. Our trees have prospered, and there is shell on my reef. I have come to Tahiti, now to buy a schooner. I can get enough shell to make it worth while to fish for it, and, who knows, I may find pearls. I have made something where there was nothing. I, too, have made beauty. You do not know what it is to look at those tall, healthy trees and think that every one I planted myself. Let me ask you the question that you asked Strickland. Do you never regret France and your old home in Brittany? Someday, when my daughter is married and my son has a wife and is able to take my place on the island, we shall go back and finish our days in the old house in which I was born. You will look back on a happy life, I said. Evidement, it is not exciting on my island, and we are very far from the world. Imagine, it takes me 4 days to come to Tahiti, but we are happy there. It is given to few men to attempt a work and to achieve it. Our life is simple and innocent. We are untouched by ambition, and what pride we have is due only to our contemplation of the work of our hands. Malice cannot touch us, nor envy attack. Mon cher monsieur, they talk of the blessedness of labor, and it is a meaningless phrase, but to me it has the most intense significance. I am a happy man. I am sure you deserve to be, I smiled. I wish I could think so. I do not know how I have deserved to have a wife who is the perfect friend and helpmate, the perfect mistress, and the perfect mother. I reflected for a while on the life that the captain suggested to my imagination. It is obvious that to lead such an existence and make so great a success of it, you must both have needed a strong will and a determined character. Perhaps, but without one other factor we could have achieved nothing. And what was that? He stopped, somewhat dramatically, and stretched out his arm. Belief in God. Without that we should have been lost. Then we arrived at the house of Dr. Coutras.